Welcome to the SecurityDNA podcast powered by SecurityInfoWatch. This is your front line for bold insights and real intelligence that cuts through the noise and gets straight to what matters most. I'm Samantha Schober, assistant editor of SecurityInfoWatch and the producer of today's episode. At SecurityInfoWatch, we deliver sharp, real-time insights into the biggest challenges facing security and risk professionals today. From emerging threats to game-changing technologies, we go beyond the headlines to provide expert analysis, real-world strategies, and critical risk intelligence, giving you the knowledge you need to stay ahead in this rapidly evolving landscape. My colleague, Steve Lasky, a seasoned security industry veteran with over 35 years of experience, will join us today. As the editorial director for the security group at Endeavor Business Media, Steve brings deep expertise and a unique perspective to every conversation. Today, we have a compelling guest as Steve welcomes Ryan Schonfeld, co-founder and CEO of HiveWatch. Ryan Schonfeld is the co-founder and CEO of HiveWatch, a pioneering security technology company transforming how organizations protect their people and assets. His journey from law enforcement to innovative tech entrepreneurship reflects a mission to modernize security approaches. Beginning his career as a police officer and investigator, Schonfeld expanded his expertise by becoming an instructor for the U.S. Department of State's Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program. His professional trajectory then led him to a leadership role in a Fortune 500 company's global security and safety technology group, where he grew frustrated with traditional, inefficient security practices. Motivated to challenge the status quo, Schonfeld founded RAS Consulting and Investigations. Through this venture, he developed comprehensive risk management strategies and technology-forward security solutions for growing organizations. His work revealed a critical gap in scalable security services, particularly for companies lacking the necessary knowledge and resources. This insight prompted the creation of RAS Watch, now HiveWatch's GSOC as a service. The COVID-19 pandemic further crystallized his vision, inspiring him to develop a SaaS platform that empowers security leaders with enhanced awareness, connectivity, and proactive capabilities. And with that, let's turn it over to Steve.
All right. A dazzling CV, Ryan.
Tells me we need a shorter version of it.
Yeah, well, I have a couple of editors keep screaming in my and Sam ears that we need to shorten our CV intros. But you know what? We like to catch the essence. We want to know who's talking with us. And you and I have collaborated a lot on various projects over the last decade or so. And I consistently find your voice to be unique at the intersection of physical security and cutting edge technology. So as the founder and CEO of HiveWatch, you bring a rare dual perspective of having served both as a corporate security practitioner and now a tech entrepreneurs. And you're reshaping how organizations approach security operations. So I'd like to kind of just jump into this and have you share some of the challenges you faced transitioning from boots on the ground in a world of corporate security to the fast-paced demands of building a technology company, because that's really a unique roadmap for a security professional.
Well, good to see you, Steve. Our conversations are always fun. And I think you're right. Building a technology company is the hard part and the thing that I had to learn. Security is what I know. But I think bringing that perspective is super important, because I think, you look at and this is what I saw as a consultant, there's great innovative products in the market, but they're not rooted in the operational challenges that the buyers are facing. And so it's almost like a product looking for a problem. What I found as an end user and what I found as a security consultant was this big gap in the technology landscape, specifically in global security operations centers, or GSOCs. And HiveWatch is really our answer to the product that I wished I had as an end user, and the product that all of our consulting customers were looking for and that we couldn't find. And while I didn't set out to start a tech company, it was either let the status quo continue to exist in security, and we can talk about the market landscape and how human capital intensive and how security practitioners historically have dealt with problems, or we could go solve the problem ourselves and figure out how do we build the technology solution that all of these companies actually need. And that's why HiveWatch exists.
You've talked about the persistent pain points that continue to plague security leaders, many of which you encountered firsthand, both as a consultant and an end user. So share with our audience a little bit why these issues remain unresolved despite years of industry evolution, and some of it is based on still some manufacturers shadow games, and then just some other issues where people just don't understand technology and how to apply it. But what are the issues that you see unresolved?
Well, I think big picture macro data is a big problem. And how you get data is interoperability of systems. And so now if we back up and say, okay, we've got all of these different point solutions that exist within the industry. And why do we have so many point solutions? There's a couple reasons. Number one, some manufacturers have been around for a very long time and they're super ingrained and embedded in these corporate security programs. Not a bad thing, just a fact of the matter. You also have a lot of security leaders that have been around for a long time and they rinse and repeat what they know. And while the technology landscape has evolved and things have moved to cloud, and we can talk about AI and automation and analytics and all of the different terms that we've heard over the years in security and what the practical applications of them are, or maybe more importantly, what they're not. The reality is, like, security leaders historically have had a problem. And a lot of times that problem is driven by X bad thing happens. And then the outcome or the result is we go and solve for that problem. And so we buy a piece of technology, or we throw another body at it, or we create a guard post. All of those things are solving the problem in the moment, but they're not actually integrating the solution into the bigger picture of the program. It's not driving this cohesive programmatic solution that's solving a problem. And so over time, what you get is this this program that continues to build on point solutions or individual solutions, and not actually a cohesive solution where maybe every year we go back and audit, are these still the right platforms for us? Do we have things in our tech stack that are duplicative? Are these even still the problems that we're trying to solve for? Looking at the number of people, the number one spend in any physical security program is people. And I'm not somebody who's going to sit here and tell you that we're going to automate away all of the people from security. You're always going to need people in physical security programs, but I can tell you, you don't need as many of them. And the things that you rely on the people to do, we should be leveling that up. We should be enabling people with the right technologies to do tasks and complete and solve problems that are difficult or that require the human brain or understand nuance and context. But like this whole, we're going to have all these operators because we need to constantly chase alarms, or we're going to have all these guards at fixed posts because of all of these historical problems that half the people don't even remember anymore what that problem was 20 years ago when we made that decision. Like, that's the part we're going to argue about.
Yeah, we have that built-in legacy of redundancy, and that we kind of just replay it like Groundhog Day. But you've
there's
emphasized
a fear of change, Steve.
Yeah, fear of change is
there's a fear of change, and there's a fear that if I remove somebody from that fixed post and then something bad happens there, that decision is going to be on me.
Sure.
And I think that's a very legacy way of thinking. And it's not that like you should just go remove people from posts and that like bad things aren't going to happen, but like, let's look holistically and say, is there value in that? Or should we start looking at all these fixed posts we have, and with the right mix of technology and people, can we say, instead of these 5 fixed posts, maybe we could deal with 2 higher quality, higher level rovers supplemented with the right tech stack? So, that's what I'm talking about.
And it makes perfect sense. And you've also emphasized the trend of efficiency that begins and ends with data. How do you practically translate raw data into concrete efficiency gains for, let's talk, say GSOCs? What are the metrics that matter the most?
Well, I often say HiveWatch is a data company that happens to be in the physical security world. And I do believe that. I also do believe we're a physical security company, and I think my background will speak to that. But at the end of the day, we talk a lot about, this is a soapbox I spend a lot of time on, but security leaders being good business people that are in the business of security. And a lot of times what I find is when we're talking about data, we're talking about, we've done this risk assessment, and if we don't implement the security control, our risk is X. And that's important. It's important to understand the risk profile. It's important to understand what you're protecting, why you're protecting it. It's important to understand if there's a breach, what that potential impact. At the end of the day, that's how risk scores are calculated. But when you're talking to business leaders, not security leaders, but business leaders, it's important that you be able to augment or present in a way that they're used to hearing things from their other operational leaders and sales leaders and marketing leaders. And that's not risk data, that's numbers, that's quantifiable data. And how do you get that when you've got in an enterprise at the low end, let's say 10, but the more typical is maybe 40 different point solutions in your tech stack that don't integrate with each other, and how every system, let's say an enterprise company bought another company. Well, now you've got two different access control systems. And each of those access control systems outputs data a different way, the way that that system thinks about data. And so one of the big challenges and the big values in what we set out to do is not just how do you connect systems together, that's kind of table stakes. Normalizing the data between systems is really the complicated part. And so building this data lake of all of this normalized data that gets output from different systems, standardizes it in a way that now as a business owner, you can look at a dashboard easily and say, these are the metrics that I care about. Here's how I want to visualize it. Here's how I need to present it to my boss. And by the way, for me to justify my budget request for next year or my budget increase or whatever, these are the data points that I need. And to be able to pull all of those and utilize that, that's what's important.
You know, you kind of, I guess that's sort of your multi-sensor resolution philosophy where, so how does ingesting data from multiple sensors reduce noise and improve detection accuracy in real world deployments?
Well, I think this has become even more relevant as we see more video AI products on the market. Sure. And the sort of commoditization, if you will, of AI models. And this is in no way talking down about those video products. I think there's awesome application for them. For me, when you look at things holistically in the program, you may need more context than just what the data of a camera can provide. And that's where that sort of, when we first started, it was all about multi-sensor. Now it's like multi-discipline and multi-product, because let's say you're using our AI operator, right? And you're a retailer and you're dealing with tens of thousands of alarms overnight in your different facilities. And today you're paying people to manually review all of those videos. Now I can overlay an AI model on top of video and I can detect things like, did somebody force entry or break the glass, or, those are basic. But now if I want to be able to look at different systems and say, okay, now compare this with my delivery schedule. So I know that somebody didn't force entry into the store. I know that what they're doing, let's say they're pushing a cart of goods from the outside to the inside. That may be a typical behavior of a delivery pattern. And then I couple that with the fact that we have a delivery scheduled at that time. And maybe there's these other data points that need to be considered. That's where I think you really find the ability to automate and use data from different systems together to drive intelligent decisions, versus just saying like, just because somebody used a key in the door doesn't necessarily mean that they're not an intruder.
Also the fact that, you've been a consultant, you've been an end user, you sort of embrace that philosophy on some of the things you espouse, like you avoided rip and replace approaches to issues that you're working on, opting instead for integration with legacy systems. So what technical or organizational challenges have you faced when uniting divergent platforms within your company's GSOC approach?
So when I took over running security systems as an end user, one of the first things I inherited was a product called a PSIM. And
we remember those.
Of course. And we around here joke that it's a literal and figurative 4-letter word.
Yeah.
In concept, the PSIM's great. Like what it set out to do and accomplish and achieve, nothing flawed there. Technically, the way in which the manufacturers went about doing those integrations was really the challenge. And so the brittleness in the API connections drove operational challenges for the end user. And so when we set out to build HiveWatch, the first thing we said was, how do we not just be another PSIM? And it's still one of the biggest pieces of conversations that we have to overcome with end users. and we get RFPs for PSIM, and as much as it pains my heart, you realize that like that's legacy mindset of what we know, but when you look at the requirements of it, it actually goes way beyond.
Well, are you of the mindset that, because when I talk to end users now, or even talk to consultants, the whole term PSIM has sort of been, dusted under the rug. I mean, it's not something that a lot of people embrace anymore, but it still seems to have value.
The concept has value. The products that existed and are mostly gone did not. And there was a lot of money and time and effort wasted on implementing these solutions that by and large didn't work. And obviously there's always exceptions to that rule, but just big picture, it wasn't a success. And so the first thing we had to look at is, in a typical enterprise, very few organizations are actually standardized on a single platform. Now, as well as I do that every manufacturer in our space does not play nice with each other. And there's lots of manufacturers who have words like open all over their website, but you dig into what open actually means, it's not actually open, or it's open if we want to be open with you. That's not open. But the end user in many cases doesn't get to pick what all their systems are. And they would love to standardize on Lenel or Genetec or Verkada or insert manufacturer name here. That's irrelevant. But the reality of business is they may have a corporate standard that they use on a go forward basis, but like mergers and acquisitions is a big reality in the enterprise. And so you acquire a company, all of a sudden you may have 1 to 17 new products that you never planned on. And so the question is, do we rip and replace all of that, or do we figure out how we bring those products into the fold? And so for us, number one, we had to develop this sort of Switzerland mentality within the industry where everybody will work with HiveWatch. That's first and foremost. And there's products that have great APIs and it's super easy to integrate. And there's products that don't have APIs or have really crappy ones. And we had to figure out how to build a process, both socially in terms of how we work with those organizations and technologically how we actually integrate with those products, so that for the end user, whether we're integrating with a very legacy on-prem product or a brand new innovative cloud product, that experience is the same. And that was really one of the biggest technical hurdles that we spent the first few years overcoming, and now we're really good at.
At the end of the day, really what you're discussing and what you're pushing is unifying disparate systems and scaling security, which seems to be, your mantra. And you've noted before too that, how edge AI and containerization is going to reshape physical security. Can you break down the current or upcoming initiatives that you guys are pushing right now that are going to start leveraging some of these trends?
Well, part of it depends on the organization's infrastructure. So if somebody's already in the cloud, we're not going to push things back to the edge. We're going to do everything in the cloud. And we love that because it's then an infrastructureless deployment for the customer, fastest potential implementation timeline. If somebody's on-prem, then in most cases, we want to do as much as we can on-prem because the vast majority of organizations don't have the bandwidth to constantly stream everything to the cloud to have it processed there. And so I think just first of all, having that pragmatic approach to understanding customers' network infrastructure and the pushback that they're going to get from IT teams and what those implementation hurdles are going to be, that drives a lot of how we think about system design and architecture. Then specifically from a edge compute and AI perspective, one of the biggest barriers that organizations have to scaling AI, if you stipulate for a second that people believe in the technology and they want to use it, and you can afford the software, the infrastructure required to run it at scale can be prohibitively expensive. The cost for GPUs is still quite high, even though I'm sure like anything, it will come down substantially over time. And so we had to think about, great, how do we build this technology? How do we build our AI operator? How do we build these things in a way that not just is an awesome product, but is pragmatic and scalable for our customer, so that it's not like, hey, here's a quote for $100,000 for software, and by the way, it's going to cost you $2 million in infrastructure. that doesn't work for anybody. And so that's a big lift right now, the way that models work. And so how we think about use of computer vision versus language models versus, all the different types and ways that you would leverage AI at the edge, and then being very pragmatic operationally about, there's certain things that security leaders will trust AI and technology for, and there's certain things that they won't. And so, like, while you can build, I hate the term whiz bang, but it always makes me smile. You can build all these whiz bang gizmos and gadgets for the end user, but at the end of the day, if they're not going to implement it and there's not going to be a tangible ROI, then it's also a waste. And so, thinking about that.
I mean, and you and I, like I said, we deal with end users a lot, and you've been one. But when you're talking to your end users and you're trying to be candid with them on the current state of what AI is in the security industry, of what's working, what's not, and where human oversight remains essential. How do you cut through the buzz? I mean, I mean, you can throw out, like you said, the numbers, the prices, but just when we're getting down to the actual functionality and the integration of how it's going to work with other systems you've got in your organization, how do you get through to these guys and gals?
We let the product speak for itself.
Okay.
And so what that actually means is, number one, extremely tight guardrails around what we do with AI and models. The big concerns that we get from organizations are AI hallucinations. It's when you're talking about anything that involves generative AI, it's data privacy. And so spending time talking about architecturally how our AI is built, where your data is housed, what data is, in our case, not shared back with any third-party data providers, because we don't share customer data. But that's a really important part of the conversation, just administratively, to even get to the point where the organization will allow you to deploy it. Okay, now you're deployed, and you have to convince a security leader to operationally let AI automatically clear alarms or dispatch guards or take on functions that historically they're only comfortable with a human doing. And so my philosophy, and I've seen different companies take different approaches to this. I think the more common approach is, here's all the amazing things our AI is going to do, like, let's let it loose on the world. My feeling is we go in and we significantly limit what we allow the AI to do. We limit it to sort of lower risk, very high impact tasks, usually around alarm clearing initially, and alarm clearing certain types of door forced and door held events in certain scenarios. And we show there's no black box AI in HiveWatch. Everything that the AI does, it thinks, why it took certain actions, is all visually represented in the interface for the customer to see. There's an ability to audit all of those, and also to send feedback back to the training of those models. And inevitably what happens when you have all of those tight guardrails around it is the customer sees how good it is, how effective it is, how fast it is, how cheap it is. And then they start saying, hey, what about this? Can it do this? Can it do that? And then it starts being driven by them rather than by us as a technology company trying to force these types of changes on them. And I find that to be much more effective.
Yeah, you always want your client driving the bus. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And as you look beyond, the AI landscape, are there other emerging technologies out there right now that excite you or concern you?
I think some of the AI specifically utilizing biometric data, I think from two standpoints. One, just being, I'm always pragmatic about things, which maybe I should be less, but the current state of privacy laws around the world makes it very hard for an organization to deploy biometric systems at any level of scale. Even within the US, right? We don't have a national standard for biometric laws. And so if I'm X enterprise and I want to roll out facial rec or anything that uses biometrics, there's different rules, even within different cities, within different states, about what I can do. And anytime that you've got that, it makes it very hard to find and choose a scalable solution. I think the other really big thing that concerns me is a lot of times our buyers are not super technical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like me, I'm probably more technical than the average, but like I started as a cop. A lot of our buyers were cops for their careers, and that's absolutely not a knock on that career, but it doesn't make them a technology expert. And so we go walk around shows like ISC West and GSX, and we see all of these products that work perfectly well in this perfectly contained environment off, canned data or offline stuff that's just running at the show. And people assume that they're going to be able to translate that to their corporate environments. But the reality is you get into the actual corporate environment and networks are messy, and IT teams and security teams don't always get along, and streaming to the cloud isn't always possible. And, IT can't support as many virtual machines or GPUs. And that lack of understanding has driven a lot of security leaders to buy things that they couldn't implement. And I think it's also soured them on leveraging some of these new technologies, not necessarily because the technology can't work, but they were never able to effectively get them implemented, whether that's their fault or not.
Kind of playing on that, cyber teams increasingly are demanding physical security data because they're working so closely. How are you enabling interoperability with existing cybersecurity frameworks and platforms? And do you see physical data being integrated into SIM or XDR systems in the near future?
Yeah, so I think I'm excited to see that there's more integration coming. I think we've been hearing um, convergence as a term in the industry for a long time. It still hasn't happened. I'm certainly seeing it more. I think there's a shift happening at sort of the macro leadership level that will drive that a little bit faster. In that, where we've seen physical security leaders historically reporting up through facilities, finance, HR. Now we're starting to see some of them reporting to the CISO, the CTO, the CIO, or within the technology org more broadly. I think that's going to change the expectation around data, interoperability of systems. And when you look at SIEMs and those products that are well optimized in the cyber world, they're still lacking a lot of context about the physical and built world.
Right.
And so that's the opportunity to drive those together. Although I'm still not seeing a lot of adoption of that in the market. There's absolutely exceptions to that rule, but not mainstream.
Very good. And I totally agree with you. Yeah, I'm going to finish it off here. I think this is a good question to end our conversation. Your organization is centered on connected intelligence. I mean, that's a foundational thing for you. So what does that mean to you in 10 years? Will future GSOCs be fully autonomous, or will human components still play a central role?
It depends. I think that there's organizations in, maybe it's mid-market where they don't have a robust, big, or even anybody dedicated to physical security. And so there's absolutely going to be opportunities there to automate certain aspects of response and detection, response, and physical security. It's not that that's going to be a replacement for a security expert. Somebody may still need to come in and do a risk assessment or do those things. And then you're going to have your more sophisticated enterprise organizations where they're looking at travel risk management and executive protection and supply chain management. And certainly a lot of components of those programs can be automated. But I think there's still going to be a human element to those, certainly at that level of scale for those organizations.
Very good. I think that's a great place to end our conversation, Ryan. Hey, it's always great to talk to you. You've got some great insights. Like you said, both of us are kind of not entry level, but sort of technologists in waiting. And I'm
Yeah.
like you. I can understand what I'm hearing, but don't ask me to give a thesis on it. And again,
And
that's
I'm
sort of
happy to make a thesis up. So
it's you and me both. And with
yeah.
AI, it's a lot easier now. So again, I appreciate you joining us, and look forward to talking to you soon. And I think probably the next time I will see you will be in New Orleans.
I'll look forward to it.
You and me both. We'll grab a cafe au lait and a beignet. All right, Sam, I'm going to let you take us out.
All right. Well, thank you, Steve and Ryan, for this compelling conversation about the changing face of physical security. And thank you for tuning in. This podcast is your go-to source for staying ahead in the security industry. It offers sharp insights, real-time trends, and straight talk for industry professionals. It's built to keep you informed and empowered wherever you are. Stay connected, stay sharp, and maintain security at the forefront. To access our podcast lineup, go to podmean.com and search for SecurityDNA. You can also find our podcasts in our Security Frontline, Integrator Newswire, and Security Week e-newsletters. This episode of the SecurityDNA podcast was recorded and produced by Samantha Schober. That's me, Assistant Editor for SecurityInfoWatch. For Steve, Ryan, and everyone at SecurityInfoWatch, thank you for listening, and keep an ear open for our next podcast.